Coming up, who saw that coming? A mutiny over KCI.
The council just disregarded the vote of the people, in my opinion, yes.
Also this week, we head to Johnson County and why so much angst over the ouster of this man. Plus, a murderous end to 2017, the highest number of homicides in 23 years. And he was one of the brightest stars in local government. He's now implicated in an illegal kickback scheme.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, Bank of America, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nick Haynes, delighted to be back with you to connect the dots on the news of the week in this place we call home. And what a week it has been, pouring through the most important local stories from the Kansas City Star, Steve Vockrodt, the senior writer for the Call newspaper, Eric Wesson, Star columnist and editorial writer, Dave Helling, and from the Pitch and KCUR News, Barbara Shelley. Issue number one, what on earth happened?
Hearing nothing else, I'm assuming that we can adjourn. Goodbye.
A seething Mayor James shutting down City Council business just as they vote to reject an agreement with Edgemoor, the design team they had picked to finance and build the new $1 billion terminal at KCI. Words like stunned, astonished, betrayed, all thrown around. Alarm over what happens now, and will Edgemoor be dumped and a new firm picked? But first of all, let's help us understand, what did Edgemoor do so terribly wrong a month after voters approved this terminal plan in a landslide election, Steve Vockrodt?
There were council members, when they saw the Memorandum of Understanding, which is basically establishing a framework for how they're going to come to a final contract and final agreement later on. They were displeased with various aspects of it, and that includes lack of specificity about the financing. There was what they felt were insufficient community benefits agreements, and community benefits are things like job training programs and transportation for workers up to the airport and a whole slew of other things. And there was also some disagreement about this $30 million reimbursement clause, and I want to be clear about what that means. And that agreement would have paid Edgemoor and the various other architecture teams and everybody else working with Edgemoor up to $30 million for work that they performed in case the project fell through and they couldn't reach financial close. And the city would say, you know, the upside to having that deal is, well, we would pay Edgemoor and their partners for the work that they've already done, and we would get to keep that work. So we're not starting over from scratch if Edgemoor can't get its act together at the end.
But couldn't these be just issues that would be dealt with behind the scenes and worked out? Eric Wesson, why did it lead to such a blow-up like this?
And that's the million-dollar question. And to go along with what Steve had said, one of the things that was interesting in talking to, when I talked to Edgemoor, I talked to and been doing texting with several council members, the interesting thing was that the community benefits agreement was put together by the council. So everything that they had requested, they got in the community benefits agreement. In addition to that, the $30 million, like Steve said, was just reimbursement for having engineers and having people do work. And it's pretty much standard procedure. It was just that because this project is $1.2 billion that you have that. But the airlines had contacted aviation, Pat Klein, and said, we'll pay that cost because that's what we do. The city will pay it. We'll reimburse the city for those costs. So I'm still trying to figure out what the real issue is. The labor agreement was something Joe Hudson had sent all the council members and the other companies something saying that they wanted 100% union. So at the end of the day, did the union have that much influence to flip them? Because mind you, those same people last week voted to let it come out of committee to the full council. So how in a week's time did they change their whole vote? So
what are the implications of this? Is it conceivable at this point, Dave Helling, that Edgemoor could be dumped completely and a brand new company picked to actually lead the terminal plan, the terminal design?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, Lee Barnes, one of the ringleaders of this effort against Edgemoor, introduced a resolution Thursday that immediately would have led to negotiations with AECOM, which was the second place bidder on the project. Lee Barnes, later agreed to have that resolution sent to committee rather than immediately voted on, which means that we'll not know for a little while whether or not AECOM is now in place. But I think Steve and Eric are telling you something important when they say that these problems that developed with the MOU could not apparently have been solved by simply sending the MOU back to committee or back to the negotiators for fixing. Instead, the council killed the deal. That suggests something else is at work that goes beyond just the problems in the MOU, and I think there is an effort to displace Edgemoor and replace them with AECOM and perhaps Burns and McDonnell as well.
And some people believe that that was the plan all along, Steve Orcutt.
Could be. I mean, Lee Barnes was very clear yesterday that he thought AECOM was the better team, and he said that. You know, that wasn't a new revelation from him. He's been all along very favorable towards AECOM. I think one of the signs that this was coming about was when the committee sent this for an up and down vote. There was yesterday. There was some talk in that committee about, you know, do we hold this? Do we work out some of these details? And I think there were some council members who were dissatisfied who put it up for a vote. And this is my suspicion, but I think this is a continuation of something that we've seen on this city council and with this mayor for a while, is that there's some council members who feel like the mayor and a few others drive a lot of these decisions without their consultation. And by putting it up for a vote, that gave everybody a chance for everybody to know where they're at on this. And that's what we saw yesterday.
Barbara.
I assume we'll find out more about this as the weeks go by and all the motives and all, but clearly there's been a breakdown in process here. And it confuses people. They don't understand it. They're angry. I thought the Star had a spot-on editorial this morning. I mean, people went to the polls expecting that there is now a process for an airport and we're going to start to see construction pretty soon. And now it's all awry.
And really, with all the nitty-gritty details and the people involved, but does this actually delay what people are now salivating over about this new terminal?
Well, we'll see. I mean, some council members said no, if we have to go to a new bidder or renegotiate, it shouldn't appreciably delay the project. But Barbara said something so important that I think the viewers and voters of Kansas City have to consider. Trust is so important with the city council. And people have to trust that when they're told a thing, that trust will be honored later. And to the extent that they now feel betrayed by this decision, the April vote, for example, on a capital improvement sales tax may be more difficult because you can't believe commitments from the council, and I'm not sure everyone thought that through yesterday.
Eric.
And in this process, I think with the talk about the $30 million and the other thing with the agreement, it demonized Edgemoor. They are bad people. We couldn't negotiate this deal. Not to mention or let people know that they never went back to the table to talk to them, as Dave has said. But it's one key thing. In the black community, there's always been a trust issue. I have listened to so many people over the past 24 hours. I told you so, I told you so, I told you they were going to do this. So now we got the unions in here. That means the MBE numbers won't be the same or what they're supposed to do, and black workers won't be working on this. And this is after we passed it. So by demonizing Edgemoor as they've done with this $30 million and not explain to people that, hey, we're going to be reimbursed and the airlines have paid for it, I doubt, even though Edgemoor said they want to meet with all the council people personally, I doubt if they'll come back to the table.
Okay, well, there are trust issues, not just in Kansas City, as you point out, but also in Johnson County. He was one of the highest paid public officials in Kansas, and up until a few weeks ago, most people couldn't even name or pick him out in a lineup. So why so much angst and protest over a move by the Johnson County Commission not to renew the contract of its county manager, Hannes Zacharias?
Change solely for the sake of change creates anxiousness, apprehension, and concern, and is counterproductive.
Some of you have been texting on your cell phone, and some of you, Mr. Klicka, have not raised your eyes to look at the people standing here, except when the head of the Chamber of Commerce was in here.
Okay, so what did Hannes Zacharias do that county leaders found so unpalatable that they wanted to get rid of him as the county manager? Barbara?
Well, apparently he didn't do anything, and I think the reason they thought they got rid of him was because they could. You had a faction that decided, they wanted to change, and that's why people are so angry. A lot of the support for Hannes Zacharias comes from Johnson County employees who thought he was a good city manager, he was fair, he ran a good shop, the county was doing well. Why just get together and decide to not renew his contract at this point? There's no real reason for it.
Does it really matter, though, who is the county manager when you have elected officials, including a full-time elected chair in Ed Eilert as leading county government?
Obviously, it matters to some degree, Nick. In any municipality or any subdivision of government, management is important, and this is no exception. I do think that the biggest argument in favor of Hannes Zacharias is the relatively smooth functioning of county government. We don't see a lot of problems in contracting or other things. And that's led many people to believe that this move to remove him from office was much more about ideology and politics than it was about performance. And that worries a lot of people in Johnson County. If government over there, not just at the county level, but at the municipality level, becomes about ideology and Republicans versus Democrats and red versus blue, it will presumably, or at least potentially, harm the good government ethos in Johnson County, and that's really what I think people are worried about after this.
Now, he was the one who said he thought this was about moving the county in a more socially conservative direction, but yet county commissioners said that was, who voted for this, had nothing to do with it.
And he also said, Mr. Zacharias said that he thought the commissioners wanted to get more actively involved in management themselves, and that's really kind of a recipe for trouble if that comes about.
We can sometimes be numb to the numbers, but Kansas City just hit 142 homicides. That doesn't just surpass anything we've seen in the last couple of years. How about the highest number of murders in 23 years in Kansas City? In Chicago, long considered the poster child for violent crime, murders and shootings are down substantially on last year. Is there any evidence that city leaders and law enforcement authorities have a better handle on what's happening here and how to fix it, Eric?
No. Some of the people have been calling us. They had the hot spots, or Forte had when he was the chief of police. The hot spots, they've taken those personnel out of those areas, I think on Cypress, and they've moved them to other areas because of the shortage of police officers. So now, in a result, there's been 5 homicides in that area the last time I counted over the past few weeks. So I don't think they have a grip on it. I think things are really getting out of hand, even more so than they appear, because in addition to the homicides, you got to look at how many people have been shot that just didn't die. So your assault rates are up and all of those sort of things. And I don't hear anybody with a viable solution or a plan other than getting more police. And that
I did see that. Didn't the city just get a major financial award from the federal government to help with the issue of gun shootings?
They've gotten that before, and it didn't resolve anything. Aim for Peace has gotten a ton of money. That didn't resolve anything. In their areas, they claim that the homicide rate is down, but it hasn't filtered over into the other areas. So I think the thing is figuring out how to engage the community, how to engage bad guys to where it stops. Because a lot of these homicides, you just had a son shoot and kill his father. I mean, there's a lot of domestic issues that are going on, and I doubt very seriously if getting some money is going to help that problem.
Barbara.
I think we do need some analysis of these shootings and these homicides and how many were domestic violence and how many were drug-related, and kind of work on solutions. There's no blanket solution for homicides. You need to look at what's causing them and work on solutions based on the cause.
A lot of guns, little tolerance, inability to resolve conflict. Those are the issues.
You know, there is a mayor's race that's beginning, and with a huge number of candidates already getting into that race. Is crime a big part of that race, or is that still not the issue that even the mayoral candidates are talking about?
Yeah, no, it will be the issue. I think even bigger than the airport or other purchasing decisions, the next mayor and council will have to propose some way to ameliorate the violence in Kansas City. What that approach is isn't clear, But I think voters will really are really shocked by the number this year and will insist that their candidates come up with some way to address it.
He was one of the brightest stars in local government. Then he abruptly resigned 2 years ago, this month.
I don't want to do any major announcements. I really want to take about a month here to spend time with my family, something I really haven't been able to do for 9 years.
Now the former head of Jackson County government is back in the news, implicated in an illegal kickback scheme. According to the Kansas City Star, Mike Sanders used a disabled friend to cash more than $60,000 in checks made out to him from campaign accounts Sanders controlled. The friend would keep a few $100s of each check and return the rest to Sanders, according to the Star report, which they say is the subject of a 4-year federal investigation. The FBI has been investigating this for 4 years. If there is so much evidence against Sanders, why no charges filed, Steve Vockrodt?
Well, you know, the feds work on their own timeline, and they, of course, have some statute of limitations issues. And we don't know yet what all else they could or might be looking into. I mean, we know from a couple years ago there was a report that the feds were looking into Sanders' handling of a contract that went to a consultant who used to work with Jay Nixon. And, you know, when the feds get in, there's no telling where else they go. And, you know, again, the feds are pretty opaque. They do their investigations on their own timelines, and they do it for their own purposes. And so, you know, I can't answer the question about why no charges or anything.
Can you
like
answer the question of why Stephen Hill, the disabled man in this case, who says he was a friend of Mike Sanders, a good friend of Mike Sanders, who was cashing the checks, why is he coming forward now and saying the things that he is about what was his friend?
I don't know how much I would say he came forward and just, you know, volunteered it. I mean, my colleague Mike Hendricks, who worked on the story with me, who did an incredible job of reporting, you know, Hill was not a person who volunteered himself. I think we had to ask to talk to him several times, and he eventually did. Part of what he said to us is that he felt like, you know, the truth needed to come out, and you know, for whatever other motives he may have had, you know, that would be a question for him. But he came forward, you know, he didn't come forward, you know, shopping the story around.
Just because, though, there may be an FBI investigation doesn't mean anything is going to happen, though. We've seen that in the past. We had confidants of Sam Brownback, the governor of Kansas. Even 4 years ago, there was lots of headlines about that. Nothing happened with that, Dave Hatton.
Right. The federal government checks into a lot of allegations, and sometimes grand juries and prosecutors file charges, and sometimes they don't. I think the length of this investigation suggests that what the Star reported may be just part of a bigger puzzle. The other thing to keep in mind, Nick, is we need to understand where the money came from that went into the committee that then Mike Sanders wrote checks against, and whether there's any pay to play or any sort of quid pro quo involved in that process. And the federal government has subpoena power, which Steve Vockrodt and Mike Hendricks do not have, nor do any of us. And so it may take some time to knit it all together. Steve didn't mention this, but he's reported that Mike has stepped away from, Sanders has stepped away from his law firm for a time. So obviously there is something that we need to keep our eye on in the case of Mike Sanders, and we'll see how it all develops.
But haven't people been indicted and gone to prison for taking campaign money and using it illegally?
Right, and
that's probably why he didn't make the checks out to himself. He did it to somebody else.
Although the allegation is, and Steve, jump in here, the allegation is that he did not necessarily use the money illegally. He might have used it for campaign purposes, but the very act of doing what he did may indeed violate the law, and I yield to my colleague if I misstated that in any way.
Well, I think in any, you know, in a lot of circumstances, if you are having somebody cash checks and then give the cash back to you, you're trying to obscure a money trail. And that, I'm just saying that generally as a general proposition.
Right.
And you're saying that they're paid to go get out the vote, and you're paid for other
Correct.
things that they admit that they didn't do.
Correct.
So,
Barbara.
Yeah, I think Mike Sanders is an operator extraordinaire and a fast talker, and I think I think we're likely to see that he's going to claim that some of this money was spent on legitimate political work, maybe clandestine political work that he didn't want his name associated with. But there's no way he comes out of this looking good.
But a lot of I mean, he's been out of political office, though, now for 2 years. So what are the implications of this story today, do you think, Eric?
It's pretty much slams his name, his credibility, his integrity. I think he was probably the heir apparent, many people thought, to Emanuel Cleaver's seat in the House of the United States Congress. I think that's out the window now. So I think it's the embarrassment. You know, his wife, his kids will have to go through and deal with this. But, you know, Mike was an up-and-coming Democratic star, and I think now he's crashed to the ground.
It certainly captures people's attention when you see a headline that says that the Missouri governor is using a super-secret app that allows him to send text messages that self-destruct immediately after they're read. It sounds like something out of a spy movie. It is actually called Confide. Why are so many people hot under the collar that Eric Greitens is using a phone app that anyone can download for free, Dave Helling?
Well, because Governor Eric Greitens is not just anyone. He happens to be the governor of the state, and his text messages, by almost common agreement, are public records, just like any other electronic communication, and that the public and the press have a right to look at those messages if they ask for them and need them for information about their government. And an instant erase app obscures and eliminates, for many people, the chance of knowing what the governor and his allies are talking about. And you know, we're going to write this weekend that the state law should ban the use of this on phones of public officials. We have a right to see those text messages, and they're trying to hide them.
But Stevie is hardly alone in doing so. I was looking at news reports relating to Confide. I see everything from the Australian Prime Minister using this liberally to members of the White House staff who have been leaking to the media and using Confide too. So this is a pretty common app for public officials.
It may be. I don't know. You know, I don't know all the different laws as it relates to open records, as it relates to Australia or even the federal government. But I think there's a pretty persuasive case to be made that, you know, under state law, that these records should be open, they should be available to the public. And, you know, I think people probably noticed that the Star's been on a pretty big transparency kick of late. And the reason for that is I think we're growing a little bit tired of seeing government officials treating government like it's private business. It's not their business, it's our business.
But how do you know that somebody's actually doing it? How do we know that Mayor Sly James wasn't using Confide himself during the airport negotiations, for instance, or your local city councilman or favorite state legislator?
I think there's kind of, you know, when you get on Confide, you have a name, and it kind of, you know, it's kind of out there that at least you're a member of Confide, is my understanding. It's just kind of interesting, you know, how much the technology's evolved, because when Matt Blunt was governor, there was a big controversy. He was claiming that emails weren't, you know, official correspondence, and now we're at the part of disappearing messages and arguing about that.
Let me just say, nothing prohibits a public official from talking to another public official and keeping that private. Just a conversation in the office or even on the telephone. These are electronic communications, and they are clearly covered under the Missouri Sunshine Law. The Attorney General, Josh Hawley, has said so. Other text messages have been sought through open records requests. We think the legislature should clarify that language next year, but the idea that the governor can, in essence, erase electronic messages with his allies at his leisure should offend most Missourians and should be fixed.
And was it campaign business, or was it official business as the governor, or which one of the two they were talking about between the two? And now in this day and age of sexual harassment and that kind of thing, you don't know whether something was said by somebody else that might not have been appropriate. So we need to have an opportunity to go and look at him, what he's saying in those
It might have been
messages.
just telling someone how many push-ups he had done that day, Barbara.
Exactly.
Might have been, but I think we'd all want to know that.
Okay.
Exactly.
With 73,000 candidates already declaring their intention to run for governor of Kansas, why are Democrats getting so irked over this man? And why are they saying nearly a year before Election Day that independent candidate Greg Orman has just handed the keys to the governor's mansion to Republican Chris Kobach?
Well, because Democrats believe that if there is a three-way race in November of 2018, that Orman will draw more votes from the Democrat than whoever the nominee is. And by the way, quickly breaking news, Senator Laura Kelly, a Democrat from Topeka, is entering the race on the Democratic side. That's good news. She's a qualified candidate. But that Orman would take more from the Democrat than Republican. I don't share that view, actually, but it's a minority view. Most people, the conventional wisdom, Nick, is that Orman will hurt whoever the Democrat is more than the Republican. And a lot of people think that Republican, by the way, will be Chris Kobach, and they're worried about
Steve.
I think Orman is testing again the idea that people are tired of the partisanship on both sides, Republican and Democrat, and that there may be an opportunity in this political climate to emerge in the middle as an independent candidate. I'm not necessarily convinced that that's going to be the case. I mean, people identify so much with one party or the other that it's an uphill battle for any independent.
Oh, you know, Greg Orman ran against Pat Roberts as an independent, and there was a lot of excitement about that. But
that's because there wasn't a Democrat in the race.
Yeah, the Democrat, as you recall, was forced out of the race or agreed to leave.
The Democrat was forced out. But when you run as an independent, you don't have an organization behind you. You know, Orman had no get out the vote effort, or it's just really hard.
Yeah, just quickly, it's hard in part because of that. You don't have infrastructure, but it's also hard because after you say, hey, I'm an independent, nothing's left to argue. And that's what I think Orman's challenge will be.
Just briefly before we end, what happened to Sam Brownback, the governor of Kansas? I thought he was going to be the new ambassador for international religious freedom. He is still the governor of Kansas.
Yes, he is, and we'll see you next week.
Okay. And that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from The Pitch and KCUR News, Barbara Shelley, and from the Kansas City Call, Eric Wesson. From the pages of your Kansas City Star, Steve Vokrot and Dave Helling. Next week, by the way, we're going to be doing our Year in Review edition of the program. You can also, by the way, get a second look at the week's news by tuning into Ruckus. You can see that Sunday morning at 11:30, right after the rebroadcast of this program. I'm Nick Haynes from all of us here at KCPT. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.